Hello, hello, hello. It's Stevie B at PTC coming at you once again with PTC Live. We have two very exciting guests today, two very dear friends of mine, and we'll be talking about Models Academy at Piedmont Technical College, one of our institution's premier community outreach efforts. And Models Academy is an acronym for Men of Distinction, Elite Leaders, and Community Servants. The two gentlemen that I'll be talking with today are integral parts of that program and its founding and its continued development. I'm going to be introducing you to Mr. Courtney Smith and Pastor Christopher B. Thomas. First of all, let's just say, guys, how are y'all doing? Courtney, Chris, how are things going?
It's going good, Steve. How about yourself?
Doing very well, man. Doing very well. Looking forward to our conversation today. And Courtney Smith, we'll tell you a little bit about his background. He is one of our, he's quite a bit younger than Chris and I, as you can probably tell. We got some years on him, but Courtney is fantastic with the young men in the program. You know, every time you have a program like, whenever you have a program like this, one of the things that you need is someone who can bridge that gap between us old heads and the young fellows that are in the program, and Courtney does that tremendously. Courtney is also a faculty member here in our criminal justice department. He has an extensive background in law enforcement. Brother Christopher Thomas, how are you today?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm doing fantastic.
All right. Pastor Christopher B. Thomas is, we like to call him our historian for Models Academy. He's been here since the beginning of the program as well and helped with the development and implementation of everything that has taken place with Models Academy. Pastor Thomas is the executive director of the Benjamin E. Mays Historic Preservation Site. And one of the great programs that we have for Models Academy is a new program that's going to be starting this fall. And Pastor Thomas is going to be talking to us about the Benjamin E. Mays the Benjamin E. Mays Scholars Program for Models Academy. But Courtney, tell us a little bit about your background and what you're doing now.
Hey, no problem, Steve. Again, appreciate you having me on, and it's always a joy to be able to sit down with my good friends and just have a great discussion. But a little bit about me. This past April, I hit my 14th year in law enforcement. I started my career in Abbeville City. Then I came over to the sheriff office in Greenwood. And while at the sheriff office, I did uniform patrol, community service, and did approximately 5 years in the narcotic unit, where I was able to work with not only the state level agencies, but the FBI and the marshals and ATF. Also, I worked at the solicitor's office. I was the investigator over there. And while I was working at the solicitor's office, I was an adjunct in the PTC criminal justice program. Opportunity presented itself. I was able to come aboard full time, and that's what I'm doing now. Also, keeping up my certification, I do part time at the Lander Police Department. So I'm just keeping my hands all in it and keeping my mind fresh with new laws and things that come about. But above all that, I have the pleasure of being one of the co-directors of this wonderful program, Models Academy, where we'll talk about that here in a few. So I done pretty much a little bit of everything, Steve.
Oh my, that's great. Pastor Christopher B. Thomas, a noted historian, academician, and man of God. Pastor, how are you today?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. So glad to be on this chat and have an opportunity to talk about Models Academy and a whole host of things.
Tell us about your background, Pastor Thomas, and how you have evolved into this tremendously important position that you hold in the Greenwood community, making sure everyone is aware of one of the greatest Greenwoodians ever and one of the finest men in African-American history.
I grew up in Sacramento, California. My father was from Greenwood, and my dad went to Tuskegee and then joined the Air Force, and that's how we ended up out in California after 2 tours of Vietnam. And I went to the public schools there, and how I got really, I was always sort of interested in history, but I became very interested in it in probably the ninth grade. I was fumbling through a big closet we had at our house and found a couple of books that were my mother's. One was The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin. But the other that sort of made me very interested in African American history was I found a book by a gentleman named John Hope Franklin, who was one of our great historians, called From Slavery to Freedom. And so as a ninth grader, I read that book, and it really set me down a path of wanting to understand our history, because particularly, this was the 80s, and even up from the 80s, 82-ish, up until the 1990s when I graduated from college. In those days, our history typically wasn't a part of curriculums or the educational experience, whether it was for K through 12 education or college education. And so I think much of my early cutting my teeth in history before I became a history student in college was just buying books, reading books, going to libraries, and reading a bunch of books about us. But the one thing I came to find out is that so many of us had really serious misconceptions about historically who we were as a people. And so I've always kind of been on a mission, I guess, to change that. One time I intended on going to graduate school. I didn't do it. I got into banking, then went into the commercial mortgage business for many years. And then in 2007, I came to Greenwood and then decided to go to grad school, to seminary. And I did that at Liberty University online, not on the campus, but did it online. And then this opportunity came about. I was here at the Benjamin E. Mays Historic Preservation Site as a tour guide about 5 years before I became the director 4 years ago. And so since that time, I've worked here as the director, and I sort of jokingly say that I wish my father was still alive, because he never understood why I took on being a history student, and I can tell him I'm finally using that history degree that I got. But that's what my background has been.
Well, one of the things that we share, the commonality between the three of us, is a passion for our community, and specifically a passion for the well-being of our African-American young males in our communities and schools. We have a very direct approach to that population and to the concerns and the needs in the African-American community. We also give tremendous credit to Dr. Ray Brooks and the administrative team here at the college and Piedmont Technical College for allowing us to develop and implement a program like Models Academy as a regular part of the college curriculum, and supporting us through financially and also through space, classrooms, physical buildings where we can do the things that we need to do to develop young men in our community. And Courtney, you have a unique perspective, a perspective that's much more unique than mine. Chris has some experience as a ride-along chaplain that he's done before, but you've seen throughout your career the reasons why programs like Models Academy are so important for African-American males in particular in our communities. You've seen the damage and the destruction firsthand, close up, and it's moved you in tremendous ways, and it's stoked your passion for what you're doing with young men.
Yes, Steve, I have seen a lot, been through a lot, and programs such as what we're doing with Models Academy is very vital to making sure that our young men are brought up in the best way as possible, teaching them life lessons. Because quite frankly, let's be honest, some of the guys that we have, they just don't get that male on male bonding. And so therefore us three are able to give that bonding, and yes, sometimes be some tough love. Absolutely. But but they know that in our heart of hearts we care for them. We want to see the best for them, and we want them to go beyond what we're doing. And all us three, our goal is for them to come back one day and, hey, take the reins of Models Academy and do greater things than what we were able to do, and the things that we are currently doing. So yes, it just a thing that I wanted to give back, to make sure that I can do my part in making sure that these young men are getting the things they need to get. Some of the things that we so passionate about. Number one is education.
Education, yes.
You in Models Academy, you will graduate, you will go to college.
That is our expectation.
That's our expectation.
We set a high bar.
We do set
Absolutely.
a high bar, and it is achievable. Again, we have PTC right here, where so many opportunities you can come to Piedmont Technical College and get a great education and do the things that you can do, and by going back out in the community and take what you learn and bringing others behind you as well.
You know, amazingly, we've had 26 young men that have graduated from Models Academy over the years. And 23 of those young men have gone on to college. Several of them at Piedmont Tech, and we've got students in HBCUs. We've got students at Coastal Carolina University. We've got students all over the place. And these students have come from all of our counties: Greenwood, Lawrence, Edgefield, Abbeville, McCormick, Newberry, and Saluda. One of the most, one of the biggest parts of our program too is making sure our young men know who they are. And Pastor Thomas, you lead that effort for us. And from a historical perspective, your passion and your expertise is one of the most outstanding parts of our program. And tell us a little bit about your passion and what your goals, what you hope to accomplish through our program.
I've always thought, Steve, that there is a kind of a missing link with African-American people about their feelings and passions about Africa. When I was in school as a young man, you know, every young person, white young person I went to school with, all wanted to go visit Europe. They had all of these sort of, you know, grandiose, respectful and loving ideas about Europe and what it was and how it, in their minds, was kind of the forerunner of America. But very few African-American people that I knew had any desire at all to go visit Africa. And part of that to me was their conception of what they'd been taught about what Africa was. And so as I studied it and then had an opportunity to go to Ghana in 1989, I realized that, you know, we have sort of been bamboozled about what our perceptions about Africa are. And that kind of has a lot to do with our perceptions of ourselves. So I've made it my mission for quite a while to try to reinstill in young people an idea about what Africa was, particularly Africa pre-colonialism and pre the transatlantic slave trade. Because again, if you have this idea that you come from people that were doing nothing but, you know, living in barbarity and swinging in the jungle and cannibalism and eating each other and all of the nonsense that has sort of been told to us about the dark continent, then you have a very problematic image of yourself. And so I've tried to change people's ideas about that. And you've heard me talk to our models, you know, about my feeling about Tarzan. I think that Tarzan sort of epitomizes, in my view, sort of what's wrong with how we view ourselves as African people. You know, Tarzan is this sort of great fantasy of Europeans that this European man can go and his family gets killed, and so he's left to be raised by gorillas in the jungle. And yet, by virtue of just him simply being white, although he's raised by gorillas, he rises up to rule over all of the Africans in the jungle, and they all sort of bow down to him. And that cannot be our self-perception. That certainly is not historically true. That whole ideology, like many things about Africa, as was presented to us in the 17th, 18th, and 19th and early 20th century, were just absolute fallacies. And so I've really tried with young people through the years to expose them to authors and books and kingdoms that they didn't even know existed. And so I think it's very important for our young people to have an opportunity to do that.
We talk an awful lot about on a daily basis amongst us. And for those of you who are watching, we talk every day. We are constantly planning, constantly trying to figure out how can we make Models Academy better? What parts are we missing? You know, we have the opportunity to talk to our young men, and we have a lot of young men that are athletes. Courtney was an athlete. Chris Thomas and I were both Division I college athletes. Yet, we don't root what we do in athleticism. We root it in their mental capacities to become the young men and fathers and leaders that we know that they can be and that we have to have in our communities. And Courtney, you talk about that quite a bit. And we're all the fathers of boys. Courtney has 2 sons. Chris has 4 sons. I have 2 sons, all of whom have been exposed to Models Academy. And when we look at those young men, what we see is leadership potential. that must be developed and cultivated so that those young men can change the narrative for those who don't understand it correctly about African American males and create a new narrative of success and expectation for the young men that are coming after them. Courtney?
Yeah, Steve, that's exactly right. Again, we go back to setting that bar extremely high, uh, not only with our sons, but with I say our sons in Models Academy because that's what they are. They are our boys.
Mhm.
So we treat them the same way as we treat our biological kids. So no holds bars, so to speak,
With parental permission.
with permission. With permission. But again, we have seen what they're going through, and you bring up athletics, excuse me. Again, we was all athletes, but every kid has that dream to, I want to go to the NFL, I want to go to NBA. When we had to get them to understand that that's a good goal, you want to reach that, but let's look at the data. Let's look at some hardcore evidence. Chances are you may not reach it that far. So what can you do? What is your plan if you don't go that far? How can you still give back to your community? And again, I blew my knee, so my college career never happened for sports. So things like that. So don't always set your mind on athletes,
And Courtney,
athletics.
that's absolutely correct because we look at the data and we know that Pastor Thomas and I were talking about this just the other day. One would think that there's scholarship for everybody, and there just simply isn't. What's going to determine the success of our young men is education, effective training, and implementation of those skills into a lifestyle of work and professionalism. And
Right.
that's what we talk about with our models. Pastor, you talk about that quite a bit also.
Yeah, one thing I left out of my background, I coached both AAU and middle school for a decade before I moved to South Carolina, and was around coaching AAU kids that were Division I college basketball bound and such. And the one thing I always tried to tell them, Steve and Courtney, about my own experiences, I was ill prepared for college. And so when I got to college, my freshman year, I did so poorly that I actually had to go to summer school that first summer just to take 12 units to make sure that I was eligible to play my sophomore year because I wasn't eligible. And it wasn't that I wasn't putting forth the effort. I just was not collegiately prepared. And then I entered an environment, even though I was at a junior college that was a very academically rigorous junior college called Cuesta Community College in California, in San Luis Obispo, California. And, based upon where I was and my peers were in terms of, where our knowledge was and what we had done so far academically, I was way behind. I wasn't prepared. And so a lot of young men that even, came from inner cities, LA, Fresno, and came to San Luis Obispo, many of them didn't, even though they were great athletes, many of them went home because they couldn't do the academic rigors that were required. So one of the things I keep telling people as well, even if you are an athlete, in addition to all of your athletic abilities, you have to make sure that you're academically prepared because you still have to go sit and compete in that classroom wherever you go to school. Sure. And so many young people don't understand that. Even I never, when I was in high school, I never took a class where my grade was based on a curve. I get to college and all of a sudden, you can say, well, I'm doing great. I got an 85. Yeah, but 70% of the class has a 94. So you're just about, you got a D right now, because that's the way they graded it. And I didn't really understand that they're basing it on how competitive you are in that classroom where you're at. And so young people need to really understand that you're going academia in many of these college campuses as a competitive environment. And you've got to be prepared to do the academic work wherever you're going to be ultimately going to school.
And our program, with all of the hard work that you two have contributed, and the daily grind that I'm on about Models Academy. You guys remember we started with, we had about 30 boys, and we decided we were going to do a gala, right? And we put them in tuxedos, and it was the awful.
Hey,
The
we
intent
tried.
was good, but we put them in the tuxedos. We marched them up there. But look at what we've been able to do for our community. Currently, Models Academy has expanded, and we have met through our conversations and determinations that we have to meet the needs of the student, of the population. They don't have to meet our needs, so we have to be flexible. We've now entered into partnerships with schools, so people don't see us as much out in a crowd with a big meeting here on campus, because we are now in 22 schools in 5 counties: Greenwood, Greenwood, Abbeville, McCormick, Newberry, and Saluda. We partner with principals and guidance counselors and with superintendents to be able to go into the schools and deliver our Models Academy message in a classroom setting with young men. We have a Models Academy manual that Pastor Thomas and Courtney and myself put together that is a curriculum that is designed to enhance their critical thinking, the historical foundation building, and to put them in situations where they have to figure out how to navigate these things. And when we do those types of programs, now we've got more than 300 models who are participating in their cohorts. I mean, in several schools in Greenwood, we have cohorts that are more than 40 students. And I thank our principals, the superintendents of the school systems, our high school teachers, and middle school teachers. And we also had to adjust and say, okay, with what's going on in the world, we have to get these kids younger. And Pastor Thomas had to move me in that direction, because I wanted to be able to be comfortable and say, hey, let's just do 9th graders. And Pastor Thomas kept telling me, and then Courtney kept saying, Steve, look, we've got to get these kids younger. We've got to get them younger. So now we're starting young men from 4th grade in the schools, and we got them from 4th through 12th and moving them along. And Pastor Thomas, talk about the academic rigor of our program, because students aren't just here to have a good time. Our models, if they're not committed to learning about themselves, they won't be successful in our program.
You know, we engage them to read. We engage them to speak and to communicate and to express themselves. We engage them to understand vocabularies and concepts that they might not normally engage in and understand. And I think that, as Courtney said earlier, you know, we just try to set the bar higher for them academically, because I don't like, education to me is a communicative experience in a classroom setting. And oftentimes our young people go to classrooms and they just sit there and disappear. They don't get involved, they don't speak, they don't engage. And so I think the program that we've tried to put together, in addition to just learning stuff, we've tried to tell them that you need to engage in your academic process, in your academic world. And a lot of them initially, push back at us. They weren't, feeling any of that. But I think over time, they've come to understand that it's important and that they can do it, because I think that's a very important part of them feeling that they can do it in of themselves.
Courtney, your value has been to the program has just been phenomenal, because over the years we've had all these cases. There wasn't just the recent cases of police violence. You have always been very grounded in the fact that violence is happening everywhere. There's Black on Black crime in our communities, and there's also these cases that are happening that our young men need to grasp and get around in their mind, to get their minds around, because they can be definitive in their perceptions of police and in society. You've offered us an opportunity. I mean, you give the program the opportunity to have a real visceral approach to these situations, and the explanation from the position of being not only a citizen, but an officer.
Yeah, Steve, a very unique perspective. And what I always try to get our guys to see that when you come in contact with a police officer, not always on a bad term, a bad situation. And it's just like any other job, or any other profession. Are there bad apples in the bunch? Of course it is. But as we have taught, us three has taught, uh, you get pulled over. Your main objective is to get home. Okay, is
Absolutely.
to get home. Is not to argue with the officer on the side of the road. Get your ticket, get your warrant, or whatever the case may be, and go on your merry way. If you got any discrepancies with the officer, that's what the chief and sheriff, and that's what the supervisor is for. As we say, live to tell your story.
Mhm.
And one thing that I have done, and Sean Mims, who's a great educator here in School
Yes,
District 50,
absolutely.
we weren't able to do it this year because of the pandemic. But for the past 2 years, we've been able to put on a hoop with a cop,
Hmm.
where we get the local kids here and they play a game against myself and a bunch of my fellow officers. The reason for that game is to get the kids to see that, hey, it is a person beyond that badge. It is a person beyond that uniform. Just trying to get to know him or her, and vice versa. As
Right.
I explained to the officers that play, hey, we got to get to know these kids. We
Yes.
got to get to know these kids who is in this community.
Yes.
Uh, they got to see us as a person or entity to they can come ask for help, not run away from us. And
Right.
the only way to do that, Steve, is breaking that glass ceiling. Now, the first game we put on, I can tell you, it was rough. It was rough. Uh,
Yeah, me and Chris is kind of looking at it like, man, they can't play.
it was,
We got to work on Courtney's jumper, Steve. I forgot about that.
You know, Courtney probably fouled out in the first minute.
I
But one thing
probably did. I know I
one thing I
did.
also wanted to interject, you know, at this point is that, you know, our program, we started 4 years ago, almost 5 years ago, it seems, and
Yeah.
we've steadily built. And I like to think that we have inspired others. And I'm glad that you mentioned Sean Mims, because he is a young man. And Courtney, I mean, and Chris and I, when we say young men, we're talking about they are young men to us. Sean has been tremendous in building a program that's working with young men using sports as the hook. But Sean is just not just having basketball camp. Sean is teaching young men life lessons.
Yes.
We have to give our shout out to um, Hoot Harrison, Jamar Crawford, outstanding fella. And Jamar's program, Next Level Lifestyles Fitness Academy, is taking young men and challenging them in the most important ways, and engaging parents and adults. So there is a movement in our community of a number of individuals who are really taking the challenge to reach out to our young men and prepare them for the realities of the life that they're going to face, and to make sure that, look, you need to be prepared. You need to be prepared. One of the things that I know that all of our groups have in common, Models Academy, Next Levels, Hoops EDU, and those other groups that we're all a part of, is that we don't offer excuses.
Yeah.
There are no excuses. You are responsible for your life. There are difficulties, there are challenges that you must face. Nobody's going to hand you anything, and you're not entitled to anything. You have to go out and earn it. And you have to know who you are. You have to be prepared academically. You have to be prepared emotionally to do the things that are necessary to become successful in your life. Pastor, I see you shaking your head. I know. I want you to talk briefly. I mean, we're probably going to go over a little bit, Russell, but here's the deal. Please tell us about the Benjamin E. Mays Scholars Program as a part of Models Academy.
It was interesting that you were just saying what you were saying, and that was one of Mays's things that he said to his young people. You know, he told those young people at Morehouse, you know, walk through life with some dignity and pride, and hold your head high up, and don't expect anybody to give anything to you because you're black. That you've got to earn it. And that was a message of Mays to the young men that he counseled and taught. Mays was very serious about the fact that you need to be responsible for for your own lives. And I think it's a message, you know, we live now in a culture that teaches young African-American males to take a victimization position. And Dr. Mays was very much against that. He told them, every tub needs to stand on its own bottom. He told these young men that he didn't bring them to Morehouse's campus to make them doctors or lawyers or educators. He said, I brought you here in hopes that when you leave Morehouse, that you'd be men. And that when someone comes to your house, that your yard and the way your house is kept and the way you rule over your family, that people will know that a Morehouse man lives here. And so this was a message that Mays, in what was chimed his 30-year ministry of manhood. This is the message that he sent out to these young men. But a few years ago, I went and I was a speaker at the Call Me Mr. conference at Clemson University, and I did a presentation on Mays. And while I was there, I really had this epiphany, I guess you would say, that I wanted to design a program that would educate young men who had a desire to be educators in both the Morehouse social gospel tradition and the educational traditions of Ben Mays. And so I drafted a program that was going to help young men at an early age to sort of intellectually engage in those conceptual things that Mays was about. He was a theologian, he was a thinker, he was an educator, he was a visionary for education. He's called the last of the great schoolmasters. And so we have a program where these young men read 4 of Dr. Mays's books. They also read 2 other books about Dr. Mays of their choice. We have a whole list of them they can read from. There is a program in biblical studies. It's 45 lessons of Old Testament, 45 lessons of New Testament, 45 lessons of biblical doctrine. They take 2 classes on, one of them is the same class that Quintard Taylor, who was my advisor in college, who later went on to the University of Washington to have a great career there, basically as a historian in blacks in the West, which was a subject that was very not well known until Quintard took it on. But we use his curriculum for their history of African Americans up until the Civil War. And then there's a class through Yale, open classes on the America from 1865 to the present. And so they undertake those. And they'll also, at some point during their time, and I usually like to spread this out over 2 years, they'll go to the Crown Forum series at Morehouse College. They'll go to the Howard Thurman Crown Forum series in November, the Martin Luther King Jr. Crown Forum series in January. It's usually the Thursday before his birthday. And they'll go to the Benjamin E. Mays Crown Forum series in March. In the 18-19 school year, when I took those group of young people, it was a great experience for them. And the thing that I think Caleb Sproul and 2 models that no longer their mother moved them, Sister Dickie's sons, moved them to Georgia. Carell Richards went with us. There was 9 of us, so we'll have to remember all the kids that went. But the thing that really
it was a great experience.
Yeah.
I didn't want to cut you off, but I wanted you to I wanted to share with everyone one of the other things that before we get off the air, that we put together. Our models program is not a program that's just meetings and having a good time. We challenge them, and we actually lose some guys and families because they expect it to be fun. What we're doing is work. We have a lot of fun, but it's work. And one of the things that we put together, Chris and Courtney and I, and Chris has been tremendous a part of being able to do this, is our models program has a curriculum. This is our models manual. And when you go through this manual, it is history and it is lessons and it is full of exercises that are teaching young men to think critically and to make decisions and teaching them to write and to read. We have an extensive library that we're continuing to build. We have partnerships in our communities with tremendous boosters that have been supporting the program. And hey, we've got Piedmont Technical College, which is just absolutely tremendous. There aren't very many colleges, and I've been in higher education for 25 years, that have taken the opportunity to make a community program part of their mission and to support that program, particularly a program that speaks specifically to one population, and that is a population of African-American men. So we are tremendously grateful for that opportunity as well. We have to round it out now because we've gone over time, but we want to just give everybody a general overview. You can get more information about Models Academy by logging on to www.ptc.edu/models. The application for Models is there. There is no application fee. Models Academy is not charging students to be a part of the program. And we're looking to continue to grow. We're looking to expand into even more schools. We're looking to develop more models mentors to assist us in communities where we can't be there. We want our program to be a program that serves every service district that Piedmont Technical College has: Greenwood, Lawrence, Edgefield, Abbeville, McCormick, Newberry, and Saluda. We're almost there. We're almost there. We've got one more county to infiltrate, for lack of a better word, and we're already making moves into the Lawrence and Lawrence County area. That's Models Academy. Courtney, any closing words?
Steve, thank you. We Russell and the staff there at PTC, we certainly appreciate this time. Again, we just continue to do the best we can do, continue to move forward, and try to make our community better, and also make our young men better. That there's no shortcut to success. It's through hard work, dedication, and having that commitment, and that's what we exemplify here with Models Academy.
Closing thoughts, Pastor Thomas.
Well, just for those that might be listening, if you have a young man that you're looking for a program to put him in, get him involved and engaged in, I encourage them to consider Models Academy. And for some of our existing Models Academy men and women, parents and young men, we have this May Scholars Program that's going to become sort of an add-on to our existing Models Academy program, probably looking at for 25, maybe young men that want to do some additional study in the life of Mays and that particular history. I encourage you to contact us and get involved.
That's it. Models Academy, Piedmont Technical College. Thank you so much to the college, Dr. Brooks, Joshua Black, and our other administrative team, Dr. Kelly Feewax, all of those individuals who are putting together these programs and supporting us in our mission to change our communities for the better. This is Stevie B at PTC signing off on another episode of PTC Live. Thank you.